Please call the roll.
Albright.
Here?
Belleville.
Here.
Benford.
Here.
Fuqua.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance I'd like to briefly read the vision of the Boulder Valley School District, which we approved last spring. We develop our children's greatest abilities and make possible the discovery and pursuit of their dreams, which, when fulfilled, will benefit us all. We provide a comprehensive and innovative approach to education and graduate successful, curious, lifelong learners who confidently confront the greatest challenges of their time. I'd like to start this meeting today with the next item on our agenda would be our superintendent's report. And Bruce?
Good evening, President Albright, members of the board. It's great to be with you this evening after our winter break. So I have a number of items I'd like to review with you, and if you have questions about any of these topics, I'd be glad to elaborate further. Maybe the first order or item I'd like to mention is that I had the opportunity this morning to participate in what was billed as the Boulder Town and Gown Forum, and so it was an opportunity for me to participate along with the head of the Chamber of Commerce, University of Colorado Boulder, as well as the city manager, and we presented to a gathering of folks and talked about things that are important to each of our institutions, and also to answer some questions. So some of you were in attendance. Thank you for being there. I thought it was both a fun and engaging session, and hopefully was worth folks' time to attend. So these are individuals who I work with regularly as a part of my job, and also obviously institutions that we collaborate with in our daily work. So the other thing I would mention is that there was an article this morning in the Camera that talked about concerns about enrollment at Louisville Elementary, and Amy Bounds, who authored that article, mentioned in the article that we were going to meet with city staff, and so I just want you to know we did that. Members of our leadership team met with their planning staff and members, city manager and deputy city manager for Louisville, and visited about some of the enrollment challenges for Louisville Elementary School. And we still have about 10% of the students that attend Louisville Elementary that are open enrolled. And so where we are today is that we have we will not have any more open enrolled students join that building because it's at or near capacity. And then we are also going to be able to free up 2 classrooms that will be available for students to be able to use next year, which will help us with our capacity within the building. It will remain one of our largest elementary schools. Crestview would be, I think, the other largest of our large elementary schools. And so so we believe we're, Glenn Segru, who does our planning for us, we believe we're in a good place for the next couple of years with regard to that particular elementary school. Part of what we visited with representatives from the city of Louisville about was, one of the questions was, so what's the capacity in our whole community with our other elementary schools? And so we actually have space available both at Coal Creek as well as Fireside. And so if folks want to attend a Louisville school, then they could open enrolled in one of those others. We also offered, and I think we'll be taken up on this offer, is that if their city commission and or mayor would like to visit about these topics and have some enrollment data, we would be glad to share that with them. As you recall, we met with the city of Louisville 2 years ago, and Chuck Sisk was the mayor at the time. And so as we meet with any of our municipal partners, part of that presentation are the demographics, as you recall. And so refreshing that information for Louisville might be helpful for them as they are asked by the community questions about trends and patterns and those kinds of things. So we'll follow up with the city council and the mayor and provide the information they would like to have, and obviously continue to communicate with the community there. One of the other things I wanted to just mention is that as the legislative session has started, and I serve as co-chair of the Colorado Association of School Executives legislative group. We've had a couple of meetings as we've gotten prepared for the start of the session. You all follow this like I do, not a lot of new legislative activity regarding K-12 yet. There are a few things that are coming out. So it would appear that They're heeding our request that we don't need a lot of new expectations placed on schools right now. And that was our message to our delegation in the fall, and so we're hopeful that'll be the case. I think the primary area of work that we'll be doing in this session will be around funding. So we know the governor has proposed to the Joint Budget Committee the increase in funding for schools, a base level increase to match inflation, 2.6% plus growth. So that's what was introduced by the governor in November, still stands. I think many of us believe, Colorado School Boards Association, Colorado Education Association, our organizations, many of us believe there's more money than that available that could be used for K-12 education, pre-K-12, and so I think that's our job, is to figure out how to convince our lawmakers that there's more money available and that it should be allocated to schools. So each of our organizations have indicated that a highest priority would be to buy down the negative factor, and so we've been working, the superintendents and other administrators have been working on proposals that we would like to bring forward in this session. I'll obviously share those with you once we have a little more of the detail worked out and agreement around those. We think a unified voice between all those who have interest in pre-K-12 around school funding issues would be the most powerful message so that we can stay together. I mean, obviously restoring the negative factor over time would replace some of the services and programs that Bvsd lost during those years, as well as schools across the state. The state superintendents gathered on Friday, January 3rd, superintendents from across the state, really to have this conversation. We had a great day-long meeting visiting about strategies going into the session and needs of schools. And of course, what we found is we have more in common than we have different, despite the location of the school districts and the size of the districts and the unique populations. But the bottom line is folks just need resources restored so they can build on programs and continue to be successful. So anyway, that's some work we're doing right now and working in the legislative session. Next Tuesday, a week from today, we'll have a work session that will provide an update to you on our work around the strategic planning. We had a day-long session last Thursday with our steering committee, so we'll be prepared to give you an update and also engage in conversation around that. So that's a week from today that we'll be doing that at 5 p.m. Another process I want to mention to you is a part of our ongoing effort to refine our employee selection process. You know that we've introduced a few new things in the last couple of years, and we've talked about those. We're going to maintain those for right now. One of the tools that we added was a program called AppleTrack. It is a common electronic application system, so it's what you fill out if you want to be an employee of the Boulder Valley School District, regardless of the nature of work that you want to do. It's where you put the critical employment information, letters of reference, those kinds of things, so an electronic application. A new dimension that we're going to add, and we'll start it as soon as we hire our principals for our vacancies, so that'll be our first hiring for professional staff in the season. We are preparing to do that right now. We've done the advertising. Is that once a candidate is selected for further consideration, so they advance in the applicant pool, then there's a program called HireView, H-I-R-E, View, and what as an applicant, if you're moved to that next level, then you would receive an email from us that says we'd like you to go online and do basically a digital interview. And so it's a video interview. It's probably the easiest way to think about it is like Skype. And so that you would, this is a fairly well-developed program, that you would sign on and then you would respond to a series of questions. In this case, there'll be 5 questions. And then when you do that, it videotapes your responses, so you're responding to that. And then that's stored digitally in a server so that we can access it. There will also be one written response. And so that will allow our staff, our administrative staff, to review these interviews online, so there'll be recorded video interviews. And then, so let's just say we had 15 of those individuals. We want to advance 6, say, to the school-based interview, then they would be able, our staff would be able to review those 15 interviews in this digital video recording format, and then along with paper review and screening, well, not paper, but electronic review of their files. So it'll be one more tool for us to consider candidates as we make the decision of who the finalists or semifinalists should be that would go to the school-based team. So from that point on, our process will remain the same. We'll still do our school-based interviews. We'll have a team, as we've done in the past, in the principal selection of employees and parents and others that will participate in that. So this is another pre-screening tool that we'll use. This particular tool is used fairly widely by industry, nationally, internationally, and some school districts around the country. So we've been learning about it, and we think it'll add a dimension. We will plan to do this with other employees as well, so not just principal selection. So we're working through the process right now about how we'll use it in the teacher interview process, et cetera. So the old-fashioned way to do this would have been to call and do individual interviews or and so on the phone or something. And so this will create a little more flexibility around that. The candidate can sign on and do this interview anytime, 24/7, within the window of time that we provide them to do that. The other advantage is that it is saved. So if they're pursuing another opportunity in the district, then we wouldn't have to have them retake the interview. We'd simply be able to go back and review that. So it's called Higher View. We'll keep you posted, see if it meets our expectations and needs as we go forward. The other area I wanted to mention briefly is that we had an opportunity to visit with Senator Johnston right before the holiday break. Senator Johnston reached out to us and asked if we would be willing to visit with him about educator effectiveness, how things are going for us with the implementation of Senate Bill 191. So we had a number of staff, teacher leaders, principal or administrative leadership that have been working on educator effectiveness. So we had a nice conversation with him. We're able to provide him an update on work that we're doing and the work that's ahead of us. We'll also have a work session on that in the near future for the board around that. And so I think the takeaway was for us in our communication with Senator Johnston was that we're feeling pretty good about the work we're doing. We're making good progress. We might not be quite on the timeline, but we're making good progress. And a couple of areas that we know that we'll be challenged by. One is how to exactly use that 50% achievement piece. A worry for us about how to put that all together, but not just us. Districts across the state are worrying about that, trying to figure it out. The other would be just as we identify areas that professional staff want to improve upon, having adequate resources to provide high-quality professional development. And so, we're working on that, trying to secure those dollars in our district. But really, with the budget shortfalls over the years, that's really been an area that's been underfunded in the state and our district as well. So we left him with those messages, and we'll see if any of that plays out during this upcoming legislative session. So anyway, that concludes my report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Board members, questions? Shelley?
On Higher View, do they get the questions in advance, or they just log on and they have to respond?
They do not get the questions in advance. The format is, Shelley, that I personally have done it, so I can speak from experience, is that they do a nice job, I would say, of getting oriented. Deirdre taped a welcome to the candidates, so it's personalized in that way. It's very much looks like a Bvsd, so it's not, so it's our logo and those kinds of things. And then there are tips on, if one's never done this before, it can be a little unnerving. And so there's two things. There are like tips to, kind of prepare. And then there are sample questions. So if they want to mess with it, they can, and none of that's saved. And then when they're ready to start, they can. Once they're in, they're in. If they break the recording for, something happens, they can resume it at that place. It'll, if you're question 3 and then for whatever reason your internet goes down or, whatever, the dog's barking, then you can stop and then you can come back and then you start on question 4. So, but they do not see the questions in advance. These are questions that we would call, what we call fit questions. They're pretty open-ended, not that hard to answer if one's ready to compete for a position. So they're the kinds of questions we use when we do telephone pre-screening interviews, really just to kind of get to know the candidate a little bit better, their background, their belief about issues. So not technical kinds of questions, not questions specific to operations of our district, more kind of philosophical and again, what we call fit kinds of questions, but they are not given them in advance.
So they're the same for every candidate?
They would be the same for every candidate.
So if you did your interview, you could go tell someone what the questions were?
You could tell your competition if you
So
wanted
in a short amount of time, everyone could know what those questions are and be
Sure,
prepared
sure.
for them?
Yeah, I think the need to ask the same questions in a screening interview so every candidate has the same opportunity is important for personnel reasons. Now, when we get to the next level of interviews, again, we use standard questions within that interview process, with the exception that there might be follow-up questions. that we would do that would be unique to that candidate within that next level of interview process.
Thank you.
Board members, other questions? I had a question about higher review as well. What other districts in Colorado are using, are any other
No other
districts in
districts.
Colorado?
And to our knowledge, Lori, no other districts in
Okay,
Colorado. are
will be
using
it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll see how it
All
goes.
right. Great,
We'll share our success.
thanks.
You bet.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is student communication, and so we'll skip that tonight. And the item after that is public participation, and we do have one speaker. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking on non-agenda items. Please limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, which we won't tonight because we have one speaker. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There's a lighting system on the podium. It starts at green when your 2 minutes start. It turns yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining. It turns red when your time is up. And at that point, we'd like to ask you to wrap up your comment. Our first and only speaker is Brittany, is it Boyd? Vote, sorry, yep. Okay, talking about kindergarten. So Brittany, please, thank you.
Alrighty, so I was here obviously last month talking about this, and we all seem to be in agreement. Bruce had contributed that it's a subject that's been visited a number of times over the years. Jenny had contributed that it's clearly not best practice. I certainly appreciated the proposal to talk to state legislators about that. Obviously, that is a multi-year, perhaps never sort of prospect. So I gave you guys this, which has 4 different proposals in it. We had a feeling that the limiting issue was state funding, which seemed to be confirmed at the last meeting. So all of these proposals have complete ability to be implemented and continued through the years without any state funding. So I was wondering if anybody read it, anybody had any thoughts or comments, what our next step would be. Do we have a blessing to move forward with one or more of these? Where do we go from here? And that's it.
Well, as a board, we typically don't really respond to people who have ideas, but Bruce, this was on our, we did have a discussion about it last time, and I don't know if you might bring us up to date.
Comment. We are still in process and working on this issue with the state legislature. This is actually an active proposal that's being discussed, at least in legislative leadership, as a possibility of funding as soon as this session. So, I mean, obviously, there are no guarantees until they leave town.
When is this session?
Pardon?
When would be this, like what would be the
So
date?
it's happening right now,
Oh,
this
okay.
legislative session. And
Okay.
so, I mean, I don't want to overpromise this, but what we know from conversations with our delegation and legislative leadership, that for those who believe, and as I mentioned earlier, the governor has a proposed budget for funding for schools, that those who believe there should be more money allocated to schools than what is in the original proposed budget, one of the areas, there are more than one, but one of the areas is to fund full-day kindergarten. And so I would just say it's in discussion, and will be more formally in discussion once they get into school funding and resources available. So that's one issue. The other is a part of our capital improvement planning committee work under the leadership of Assistant Superintendent Don Orr. One of the things we'll look at is our facilities in our district to see what our capacity is to expand kindergarten offerings. In some buildings, we'd have the ability to do that, in others we would not. We are not presently seriously pursuing any form of a tuition-based kindergarten approach until some of these other areas are exhausted. So that, I would say, is where we are today with discussion of kindergarten offerings in the district.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thanks. Okay, the next item on our agenda is board communication. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? It's a quiet group.
So I will respond briefly, which is, it's been a month since we've had a board meeting. I did look at your proposals, and sorry, I don't have them with me, and I can't remember, but I do think that an appropriate place for this to be discussed, because I think what your questions were around early admission to kindergarten for students for whom that's appropriate, and the way that the state law currently really limits that, the opportunity to start kindergarten a year early to the top 2% of the top 2%. I mean, just practically nobody. And so, but I would think that some of your proposals, I mean, we're going through a strategic planning process now, and one of the issues that should be addressed is the way we offer services to our talented and gifted students. So I think that if I were you, I would keep an eye on that process, because that process will come back to the board with recommendations, and to the staff with they'll just come back with recommendations on how all these things ought to be handled. And so perhaps that'll be addressed. I mean, so those kinds of concerns will be addressed as part of the overall whole issue. But thank you for I do remember it, I just can't respond specifically. And then I'd like to thank you for your participation in the Town and Gown discussion this morning. I was actually, four of us were there, so Shelley was there, and Tina, and Lori and I were there. And it was an interesting conversation, and one of the things that I found really heartening was the sort of level. It was clear to me that, and I think we all know this as board members anyway, that there's already a lot of collaboration going on among the four entities, the Chamber of Commerce, the university, the city, and in all of our communities actually, and the school district. So that was the level of cooperation going on, and the agreement, and the amount of support in our community for public education, I think was really heartening. So thanks for participating in that.
Sam?
So I just kind of by coincidence, I think in the last few days, I saw the spectrum of our efforts, or a good example of the spectrum of our efforts to serve our teens and young adults. Yesterday, visiting Halcyon, the day treatment program we have for middle and high school students with severe emotional, mental health issues, and was impressed by the commitment of Principal Matthew Dudek, who just deeply committed, as the staff seem to be, to serving kids who are having a tough time, and also in getting them back into their home schools and keeping the curriculum as connected to what they would be learning at their home schools as possible. And then a couple days before, Tina and I visited what is one of our largest and I think most complicated high schools, Boulder High. And I'm again impressed by the level of effort that goes into connecting with the diverse population there and improving the climate for all kids. So just an observation that I think we do some great work at the smallest possible level. That's like 23 or 24 kids at Halcyon, and then a school with some 1,900. So a glimpse for me of those two ends of the spectrum, which was, I think, important. And would encourage you to check in with Halcyon if you haven't yet. It's a really meaningful program and an important one, tucked away there in Martin Acres. So.
Tom? Sure. Yeah, thank you.
So I was able to attend the DAC committee meeting last week, which was a good meeting. Several things happened. There was a literacy update where LLI and reading recovery were discussed and presented in some detail with a lot of good questions, so that was a very good discussion. The budget process, Bill showed that timeline and how we do that, and that's following that, there's a DAC subcommittee on budget, and they have some draft recommendations that they presented with a plan that the full DAC would approve that, and they would come to us as a board by our preliminary, our first work session on the budget this year. So that's the highlights of that meeting. So I certainly encourage them to do that, bring those forward as soon as possible. Just to give you an idea, they're talking about guideline type of things, and that's what we had discussed last year in our meetings about budgets and how they would come to the board. I mentioned that was very helpful for us in establishing the guidelines that we typically will do early along, and then the work goes forward, and the information that we receive later on in the year becomes more difficult to digest because a lot of work has been done prior to that, so I encourage them to get us early input. So,
Thanks. Anyone else? I would just like to echo what was said about the discussion today. Thank you for speaking on behalf of Boulder Valley. But it was whoever had that really good idea to bring those 4 organizations together. I thought it was really good, and I would like to see more of that. It was at a pretty high level, some of the issues, but as we begin to think about how those organizations might work together, I think it can be very impactful. So thank you for moving that forward and talking about it. It was great. It was really interesting. The next item on our agenda are action items with the consent grouping, and I will read them. Personnel items, approval of minutes for December 10th special meeting, December 10th regular meeting, December 17th special meeting, acceptance of donation Broomfield High School, acceptance of donation Lafayette Elementary, acceptance of donation Manhattan Middle School, acceptance of donation Superior Elementary, acceptance of donation Whittier Elementary, approval of policies KBA, KBE, KE, KEC, KF, KFB, and KLMA. Boulder Housing Project Internet Services, new course proposals, resolution regarding notice of meetings for the Board of Education, and then, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but ZAYO agreement, indefeasible right of use and maintenance. So it's a new word for me. Do I have, phase 2, do I have a motion to? Jim, and a second? Jenny? Is there any discussion, or, let's see, let me ask, does anyone like to pull any items? Are there any questions? Shelley?
I have a few questions about the course proposals. The first one is the science, environmental science and sustainability course. I'm confused about whether that's intended to be an elective or a replacement for a full-year lab course like biology, chemistry, or physics.
So, Ron, do you want to come up to the podium? So while Dr. Ron Cabrera makes his way to the podium, so the question on the new course proposal around the environmental science and sustainability course, Shelley, is that correct? That's the course? Your question is whether that will be an elective course?
Yeah, it says on the summary that it's intended to be a science elective, but then on the actual PDF that describes it, it says that it is like a full year, maybe requirement, I guess. So I'm just confused about what it's intended to be.
I'm sorry, Sheila, I had a hard time hearing you. If you could speak up a little bit directly to your microphone, or I can't hear you very well. I was just looking at, actually, I was just looking through that particular documents right now, but.
So my first question is it intended to be, it says on the summary here for the board that it's intended to be a science elective. But
That's
when you
correct.
actually go to the PDF that describes the course, it makes it sound like it's more like a replacement for a major lab course like biology, chemistry, or physics. And I'm just wondering which it's intended to be, or is it both, or am I not understanding the distinction, or do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I get it now. So the intent of the course is indeed to be an elective. However, having said that, it can be an additional lab course because those components are in there. But in terms of the normal sequence that we have, in terms of physical science and then biology, I mean, those would be the more prescriptive path. So is it conceivable that someone could say, you know, I've come in from a different school and I've already taken these types of things, and to meet our requirements, can I take the environmental course? And the answer would be yes.
So it's in addition to,
That's correct.
not in place of?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. So the other question I have is, it sounds like it's a brand-new course, and in the write-up, it said that some PD might be necessary for that, and the implication was that one day might be enough. And I'm wondering, is it really true that a course of this nature that includes physical science, earth science, biology, geography, and economics, a teacher could learn that in one day of PD? or,
Well, what I can tell you, given the nature of of what we are kind of adding to the knowledge of information that the teachers have, I mean, that's the recommendation that came forward from the Curriculum Council. Now, your insight might be accurate, but I don't know that we know that well enough until we try it out, to be honest with you. Obviously,
okay.
we want the instruction to be successful and effective.
so I guess that leads to my next question. If the materials are coming from a free online course, this Annenberg Learner curriculum, why are we charging a fee for that? Because it looks like we want to charge a fee for this free course. And I guess my other question, when I read this all the way through, is what value is Bvsd adding if the teachers aren't, like, potentially well-trained and the course is free? Like, a parent could just go online and get this course for their child and have it, their child take it at their own pace. And I just don't understand how this course really adds a lot of value.
Well, so with respect to potential costs of the course, I guess I would say, frankly, we're working off of our current practice. I mean, there wasn't actually any additional conversation with respect to that. So if we need to have another conversation with that, I'm happy to do that. The value that we have is trying to create some other opportunities and options for our students that would otherwise not be available, though.
So like if they take advanced or AP biology or something, and they want to take more science, but they don't want to take astronomy or botany, this is another option for them. Okay, well,
Yes, that's correct.
That's clear to me that adds value. But I just don't understand why we would be charging for a free online class. So that's just a question I have.
Okay.
And then I think, I looked on the Annenberg website for this course just to see if I could get some kind of handle on what the syllabus would be for it, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And there's no syllabus attached. So I just think for me, it would be really helpful when we do new course proposals if we could see a syllabus.
Well,
Or
I understand. And
some more
so
detail.
I will certainly own that one. I mean, I don't know what the past practice has been. If you want all the documents that we've had. So just, I guess what I want you to understand, and if this is for your personal interest, clearly understand that. So we've had really, all these courses have gone through a process of being vetted first at the school sites by the folks who proposed it, then gone through the curriculum councils groups to make sure they had merit and meet the standards that we have, and then they went to the coordinating curriculum council to see if they have merit in terms of the K-12 perspective. So a lot of dialogue and discussions gone through to get to the point where we're recommending for your approval. So I was just trying to save you some paperwork on that. So I can certainly forward it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, a little more detail would be helpful.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. So my next question is about the humanities course.
Uh-huh.
Typically, in World Lit,
Right.
students are required to read from many genres, like nonfiction, fiction, poetry, journals, letters, whatever. And in this course, it looks like they're just reading historical fiction, and the 3 books that are required are historical fiction. And I understand that that's what, I guess my question is somebody really going to get a World Lit education from this course? Because they're getting World Lit credit for this course. And it also
Correct.
doesn't say in here anything about what the history aspect of it is. Is there a standard textbook being used with this course? A history textbook along with the Poisonwood Bible, historical fiction? I guess in both cases, I want to make sure that kids are getting what they need and that they graduate, if they graduate with credit for World Lit, that they actually have had exposure to World Lit.
Understood. So with that particular course, it's one that has been, certainly was proposed by a group of teachers who have been piloting that course along the way, and so we're trying to formalize it. So I guess what I want to do is certainly allay your concern about whether the students would get the appropriate type of both education and rigor behind it that I think you're seeking. And so it's been, again, it was vetted actually by two different content area groups with respect to that particular course. And frankly, it met muster in terms of what we were expecting. So that speaks to, I think, that the course and the rigor behind it and meeting the outcomes that we would have in terms of educational outcomes. I can speak less in terms about the fees. Those have been kind of existing practice. So I didn't look at that, to be honest with you, in terms of my final review.
So again, it would be helpful to have something that says, here's what they'll be reading in this class.
I'm sorry, say again?
It would be helpful to have something that says, here's what they'll be reading, here's
Yes,
what they'll be
okay.
generally doing in these classes.
Right.
And the reason I think it's important is because there are a lot of trade-offs in this district.
Yeah.
You know, there are other courses that people are clamoring to have. And so these ought to be the ones that we think are absolutely the most valuable for our kids.
I agree with you, Mrs. Benford. I guess I'd say, actually, what we've done, try to do this year is actually be very thoughtful about what courses that we've approved. And so there has been a practice, in fact, in the past to be very, what's the right word? Sorry, I'm just trying to think how I might phrase this just right. We've had a practice of being, I'd say, very open to almost any course that came our way. And actually, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, both in mission and vision, I want us to be much more thoughtful, both in terms of the course and the thoughtfulness behind it, and have a well-conceived essentials document before it comes forward to you. And I think we've accomplished that this year. So I feel really good about the courses that have come forward to the Board of Education. I regret that I didn't give you more detail, and I thought I was being helpful.
Well, it's all helpful. It'd be just a little more helpful to have a little more detail
Understood.
for me. And then my last question is about the peak nutrition course. I get the second half about nutrition, but the first semester it says covers real-world issues going on in teens' lives today. And given the potentially controversial nature of that, it would be helpful to know what that means. Like, what does that include?
Right.
So just, again, you don't have to tell me now, but
Okay.
it would be helpful to just have a little more understanding of what we're approving.
Understood. Got it.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Sorry. Anything else?
Thank you, Ron.
Jim? Oh, go ahead.
I just have a question for Shelley, because I've sort of been looking this over, and I don't know where the fee, I'm a little puzzled about the fee.
Did you go into the PDF that they sent,
Well,
that they
yes.
attached?
Yes. I guess I'm just not seeing it. It's not a huge deal, but I sort of scrolled down and I didn't notice it at the time, and I don't notice it now.
Do you know what the fee is? Anybody know?
Off the top of my head, no. I could certainly bring that information back to you if you'd wish.
It's under 6B.
Oh. Oh, lab fee. Oh, so we're just talking about charging a lab fee. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Shelley. I couldn't-
Any other questions?
Okay. What? Anybody have any other questions about this? Okay.
I just have a comment.
Okay.
So I appreciate you providing the detail that we have so many of our wonderful professionals involved in studying these, having great ideas for new courses, and not afraid to bring them forward and say, this is something that, as professionals, as teachers out there, we think Bvsd should be involved with. I always appreciate seeing the courses come forward every year. This year I have particular interest in the aerospace engineering program. I know Centaurus is experiencing a lot of success with their engineering program, and I know that this was something that they actually were looking to add.
Absolutely.
For a long time. And glad to know that there's actually more work involved before we see it than I actually had ever realized. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Sandy, would you call the vote? Yes.
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 The next item on our agenda is study items for the agenda setting group, which will be meeting in early February, February 8th, I think, or 12th, something. But are there any other items anyone would like to discuss or bring up? No? Okay, I will, I have one thing. I will, because I'm now president, I would like to think about not doing the legislative liaison position. And so we'll send out a note to board members to see if there's anyone here who would like to do that. Jenny will be continuing, so we have continuity and experience, but for someone else, if you're interested, either please talk to me, talk to Jenny, or let me know. Okay, I'll send out a reminder note. Okay, anything else? Okay, so our next meeting is next Tuesday here at
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock here.
Members of the Strategic Planning Steering Committee, and any member of the public who's interested, but we will have some members of the team that will assist me and also with Deirdre to share. We'll start with just an update of where we are with the strategic planning process, and then we'll structure it in a way we really want to engage in a conversation with the board members about that work and make sure we're on the right path and what our next steps will be. So we're looking forward to the conversation, and we kind of switch the order, and then following that on the 28th, I guess it would be, is when we'll work on the superintendent's evaluation. That, if you've been following calendar, those were flip-flopped. So we, in board planning, agenda planning, we chose to turn those around. So anyway, that'll be our single work session topic next week will be the strategic planning process. So we'll look forward to the conversation.
So will the topic be on the public
It
agenda?
is.
So, because I'm looking at mine and it doesn't say.
We're working on that.
Okay.
The topic listed for the 21st for next week, is it on the website?
It is. It's just stating a strategic plan. There are no attachments to that, but I posted that a week ago.
Okay, I just don't see it on mine,
Well, that's
so.
because I think you're logged into the.
Because I'm logged in, I'm different, I'm logged in as me and not as the public, okay.
Well, but it's there, but I think right now you're just logged in under the 14th board meeting. I can show you after the meeting. what
Okay,
that's
that's, not. I actually will take your word for it, because
Yeah,
you're
no, we
usually
were
right about that.
trying to
stuff.
get,
Yes.
it up just so, but we just wanted to post it early. We didn't have much description about what it yet, but we're having a planning session. Since we moved it up a week, we're having a planning session on Friday. So if we have some advanced materials that we think will be helpful to you, not just busy work, we'll send them to you in advance. Otherwise,
Great, yeah.
we'll walk you through them with you on Tuesday. Okay,
Right.
great.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you, Sandy Brosen, our iTech crew in the back here who's helped us with this new board docs process. So we seem to have gotten through the first meeting, okay. Yeah, so
work some of the
if
bugs out.
there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.